Hello, hello. Welcome to Talking Pedagogy with Pat and Rafa. I'm Rafa.
I'm Pat. And Rafa, it seems like I just saw you just a few minutes ago.
We had our class last night at Bank Street College on theory to practice with the Reggio Emilia approach, which we really enjoy teaching. We've taught it for 5 years now, I think.
I think so. And what a great group we had last night. We always have great groups, but this was one of our larger groups. And it was just such a inspiring night of intense engagement around the beginning thinking of this approach. And it was, I left feeling, pretty inspired.
Yeah, me too. I'm also in Los Angeles right now, so it's earlier for me than normal, which is nice for me.
Hmm.
So maybe I should always be on the West Coast when we do the class.
That's a thought.
No. But anyways, speaking of theory to practice, we were thinking of talking today about revisiting some of the basics, the tenets, going back to the strong image of children. And Amika Sita likes to talk about the strong image of humans, so we include the adults in that too.
Yes.
And really talking through theory to practice and then practice back to theory. And a big part of practice back to theory is telling stories about children and what it means to have a strong image or not a strong image, and bring it back to how it informs what we do in the future. So, Pat, I
Yeah.
know there was a story that was quite powerful that was shared last night by one of our students
Yeah,
relating to the
extremely powerful.
children.
In
Yeah.
connection, to the strong image of the child. And it was told by a teacher who remembered a time when she was very young, only 3 years old, where she was in her classroom and she had a straw and the straw had liquid in it. And she was very fixated on noticing how her movement of the finger being either at the top of the straw or taken away would impact the movement of the liquid in the straw. And she was trying to figure out all of the science behind what the liquid was doing in that straw and the pressure of her finger and taking it away. And it was time to clean up, and she did not want to stop. And the teacher became very upset and very punitive and actually took the straw and made the little girl, while the other children were cleaning up, stand on a chair. And that was her punishment. I don't know how long she had her stand on the chair, but this teacher was just recounting how this adult and her obviously image of the child, she didn't understand the deep thinking, critical thinking, the analysis of properties and, interest in the material. She didn't think about this child's holding this child up for that type of thinking and celebrating that. And so Rafa and I were talking about it and this morning before starting the podcast, and just how impactful that story was in connection to how adults, what their image of the child is. Do they have a strong image of children? Do they understand the complex thinking that young children are capable of? And so that story really will always stick with me, because in the Reggio Emilia approach, that could have looked so differently had the adult had that stronger image of the child, and had the adult said, "Oh my goodness," even maybe ringing a little triangle bell in the classroom and saying, "We have a moment. Everyone come around. There's an exploration here. Let's take a look at this. There's some mystery and we've got to figure it out." And celebrating that child, it could have extended the learning for others. And so, yeah, that's what we were talking about. So I'm going to toss it back to you, Ryan. And Ryan, I'm so sorry, Rafa. I have two Ryans in my life right now, and all the R's are getting confusing. And the other one is talking in the background. But anyway, so just, yeah, Rafa, what were your further thoughts on that?
Well, I'll just first say that reminds me of my brothers Alejandro and my or Alex, and my mom calls me Ralex all the time. So I found it very
It
endearing.
happens. Thank you.
That story just really struck me for a couple reasons. One is just how much our actions can say about the image of children we have in any moment, right? That can change moment to moment. And uh, the the complexity, the question of complexity comes up to me of like, what were the conditions for the educator as well? Like,
Absolutely.
how were they supported or not supported? Or maybe they were and they still were like that. So I don't know. But centering the child really is really more fundamental here, and recognizing that how much impact, what tells me how much impact I can have on a child,
Yeah.
for better, for worse, and how I might forget things, but children often don't forget things, or their bodies don't forget it, right? So it's just like such a strong example of being able to make explicit our images, our stories of working with children is so important to start grappling with these realities, not just within others, but within ourselves. I can tell you, like, I've definitely not held the strongest image of children in the past, and I've grown from that. And it's still that those weaker images still live inside of me, and so I always have to be reflecting, and it never stops is what I'm trying to get at. It never stops. The process never stops. One never arrives, I believe, to a
Right.
pure, strong image of a child forever. It's requires a lot of consistent cultivating, kind of like a garden, right? The garden inside each of us. So
Oh, yeah. I agree with you, Ruff. And I think that's why we always ask people, like we did last night, to walk around in their own childhood garden and remember what it was like to be a child. And to me, that's a big part of what we can all do is stay in touch. So oftentimes adults in our busy lives, we are disconnected. It makes me think of the 100 Languages when they talk about the poem by Malaguzzi, when he talks about separating the head from the heart or the hands, is that we've been separated from wonder and from joy, simple joy of learning. And so we have this need to control a lot of our educational environments in certain ways that don't allow for a lot of that to happen. And so when we think back about your own image of remembering how you were as a child, it can really help inform you of what were those moments that you still remember, and why do you remember them? Because probably they were magical because you didn't have the constraint of time in the same ways that we do now. And I want to be honest too in saying that we understand that many teachers, especially those working in public school settings, do have a lot of structures that they have to attend to in their roles that they've agreed to do. So we're not suggesting that you have to let go of all of that, but what we're suggesting is when you have a strong image of the child, you start to look for and create and curate those moments to combat some of that pressure and that structured design of time, and allow for some of the magic to happen.
yeah, like having the cultivating or recultivating that disposition of curiosity that lives inside all of us about children and ourselves and what they're doing and why they're doing it. So it's not necessarily you don't hold limits, right, to when it's time to clean up, but there's a way to communicate limits. There's a way to, like, I think Pat, you mentioned like ringing the triangle as being flexible with the flow, but still having a flow. And that's just really difficult for a lot of us. I would say for largely because of a lot of how we've been conditioned, right? And
Right.
the time. And so that's honestly part of the reason this approach can be very challenging to understand, even in the context of the United States at least, is that it requires a lot of space to calibrate and question our core assumptions about what are we actually doing here in the school? Like, what's the purpose of education? So big questions to tackle.
They are big questions to tackle, and I think that's what we spend a lot of time in this class doing, but also it's what you and I spend a lot of time doing because this approach, which we hold so fondly and believe in so much with our spirits, is not available to so many children because of structures that keep it out and don't invite it in because the frameworks are too set, and there's just no room for this type of teacher time to think, to collaborate, to plan. And this approach really requires a lot of that. And so, how do we keep looking at our own system in America to figure out how we can bring some of these tenets into the classroom? And I think, yeah, having a strong image of the child is certainly always a good place to start. And that's something that we all can do, is remember that children are so capable, and that these early years, so much thinking is going on, and so much of laying the groundwork for future learning. So, how do we support that?
I
And
want
having a strong image of the child is one way.
absolutely. I want to as you were speaking, Pat, of how difficult it is to, and structurally right now, the structures that get in the way of implementing the approach. I do want to shout out. There's a school in Manhattan. I forget exactly where in Manhattan, but the Chloe Day School, and
Mm,
they are, I believe, a DOE school, funded school at least, that is really earnestly trying to implement the Reggio Emilia approach with largely Black and Brown children. And so I just think it's really awesome and to see that happening and to yeah for more people to experience this approach because it's so gate kept
it
behind
is.
high tuition, very white, tend to be very white schools.
It does. And that is because I think of what we were just saying, is that, well, the time for teachers to have community and critical thinking time is just not always, it's not built into contracts.
Oh
Or they
yeah,
have planning time, but how is that planning time used? And is it collaborative with other teachers, or is it silo in your own classroom and just trying to get tasks done, that you're just trying to catch up on that wheel? And I think, yeah, that's what I've seen and noticed in a lot of the schools that I've been in.
the collaborate with other teachers part's really big for me because yes, this relates to me about having a strong image of adults, like, and of each other,
Mm,
right? Because if we have a strong image and we think it's worth talking to other people about what our children are doing and we have the space to do that, not only are we deepening our practice, we're also deepening our relationships. And I think that I come from a background where if we are deepening relationships, we can do even more thinking together,
yes.
complex thinking.
It also just enriches your whole world, and time that you're spending on the planet is community. We know that humans need community, and teachers, we found, and especially through our class that we teach, and also this cohort that we're doing now that's free to people, which we'll talk about at the end. We'll invite you. Um, but teachers need community. They need a place to think through things and to check themselves and to say, have I checked out? You know, am I not very inspired? What could inspire me within the system that I'm working in? And what are some of the proactive things that I can do to change my circumstances? So, yeah, you need support. Teachers need support. We all need support, but teachers, especially right now and in our country, have been having a lot of different things thrown at them, from curriculum changes to DEI changing. After having embraced that and been trained in how to bring more of that into their work, it's now being questioned. So it's just so many things, that teachers are having to hold.
And that reminds me to remind our listeners of the anti-fascist origins of the Reggio Emilia approach, and
Thank you.
us as a result, the strong image of children that we're trying to uphold. It's in it that is a form of countering oppressive narratives in schools and beyond. So this work
Yeah.
goes is just so deep, which I think is why partly why we both enjoy it so much.
Yes, I think so. But yeah, liberating children so they have more power from the very beginnings, so that the things that they can create are limitless because they've been believed in, and they've been taught how to believe in themselves and to have the courage to make things from nothing, which is what a lot of the art based work is in the Reggio Emilia 100 languages.
We could do a whole episode on 100 languages and how that shows cognition. And there's a very provocative statement. I think it's provocative to an extent. I thought it was a very interesting statement I've been reading on some people's reflections after coming back from Reggio Emilia that it's not really about art, it's really about thinking.
Uh-huh. Oh,
Well, I'm sure you. And I just found it very provocative, and I guess it's veering a little bit off of the tenet of the strong image of children. But it's anyway. I'm just trying to say that I think that's its own thing. Obviously, though, if you have anything to say on it now,
oh no. I mean, I think it's all so connected. And I think it is about thinking and it's about believing in children to have the ability to problem solve. I mean, the artistic endeavors and projects and things that I saw when I was in Italy many years ago around the town that the children had done, you had to be engaged in high level thinking to stay on task to create these pieces of art and these projects, the water fountains for birds, the playground for birds. I mean, and this is something I think that in America it's confusing a lot to educators, perhaps maybe not all, but to some, is how the academics are finding their way into all of this work and how Reggio Emilia inspired teachers are being trained to look for those moments in projects where math is being taught, where, literacy, science, sociology, where all of it is being taught. And I think that a good project can teach all of those subjects. And so teachers are being called upon in this approach to be so creative and to really be really thinking all the time about what are they going to bring in tomorrow that's connected to that thing that they saw the children interested in today. That's one thing that I've been realizing too, is that sometimes books are not playing as much a part in sometimes the teacher's understanding of how to find invitations or to introduce ideas and thinking through really rich books for young children, and that can lead into a whole study itself, the right book. So that's another thing that I've been noticing, is that there's not as much reading, at least in some of the places I'm working, going on.
that's very interesting. Like I think of the academics and the literacies in so many different ways. Like
Hmm.
there's definitely I would say it requires a good amount of skill and background, not just in development, but in mathematics and literacy
Hmm.
to and it's all related, right? I'm talking about them separately, but they're all related. To be able to see, to your point, Pat, the opportunities to extend. And that's why it can be challenging, but I believe that it's worth helping and getting educators to a place where they can do that, because then all of a sudden you go from a lesson on the letters to letters are just everywhere. Like it's just
Right.
and sounds are everywhere, and the value of music and the connection to development of reading through, phonological awareness, being able to hear sounds and play with sounds, and which is necessary for being able to read
Absolutely.
letters, right? Or like the ability to pay attention to detail, like to the letter F, let's say, different from the letter T. But where does that attention to detail come from? From when they were two, you're exposing children to more in questions and arts that require them to pay attention to detail. The paint, the
Absolutely.
lines they're making, like it's all connected, but that's not obvious unless you know, right? You know
Well,
and have experience.
exactly. And that's where that planning with intentionality comes in. That I think a lot of times also teachers scratch their head when they're first being presented with this, you know, high level approach. It is because they're not sure, what does it mean? How am I supposed to be planning? And I think that that's something that coaching helps with, because you can really break it down. It isn't simple, and you do have to be trained. And that training often is supposed to come from the community of learners that are all engaged in this work within your school. That internal training and that intentionality by the leader to make sure that the teachers and the adults are getting that time. So we started with the strong image of the child. And I think what we're now saying is it has to be a strong image of not only the child, but the adult, and understanding the vision that you're going for. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Keep going. Sorry. Yes, I
no,
can't.
no, that's all I was going to say is like, what image are you projecting overall of what you believe learning should be? And how do you cultivate that in a school? And how do you support it? And I go back to leadership is very important when being asked to for a teacher to step into this approach, because that time of grappling with some of these things together is just key.
Yeah, like this whole idea, I resonated, I felt it so much when you said that you know what you're like going for and know what you're going for in the sense, right, of not necessarily this is what I want it to look like, but know I would, and I wonder what you think, Pat, but for me, it's like know what rhythm, look, know what type of relationship you're going for, know what, all those things that together we know will result in great outcomes eventually for our little ones. But paradoxically, overemphasizing those outcomes is what
Mm.
gets in the way of meeting those outcomes.
Yeah, well, it certainly starts with relationships for sure.
Yeah,
Relationships to the children, relationships to their parents, who we see as the other partner in the learning, honored partner in the learning, relationships to your colleagues, relationships to the leadership, and the trust that you have to have in leadership to go and be vulnerable. Like, I don't know what's going on with this project. I need some support. Come in. I need fresh eyes. So, yeah, yeah, it's
Another aspect we didn't, and we're getting close to time. I guess this
yeah.
is so rich. Is that of the strong image of children and adults? Is I've been thinking about this in the context of the school I direct at the moment, Mi Casita. The importance of scaffolding just enough,
Hmm.
scaffolding for the learning of children, but also scaffolding for developing educators, right? So
Yes.
the challenge of not taking away what can be difficult about a job, not taking away the doing the reflection to then act on, and but being with people through that and letting them miss, letting them fail, if you will, letting the knowing that offering the support, right, but also there's this saying in a relational cultural work I work with. I'm probably not going to say totally correctly, but I think you'll get it. The idea of like as much support as possible, no more than is necessary. Like both at
Yeah.
the same time. Like it's not a withdrawal of support, but like really caring, really supportive, and like you can do this.
Right.
And
That
but
that dance is yeah, we're gonna make mistakes, right? Because sometimes you just don't get it just right. But having that lens that you're always looking through and stopping before rushing in to say, wait a second, is it time for me to go and in right now and help with this? Can I make more time to see if this child, given the time to struggle, can find their way through it? Is there another child that's also getting ready to support that child? Does it have, is it my job? And if it is my job, before I go in, let me be intentional about what I'm going to offer. Yeah, I
yeah,
love that, Rafa.
yeah,
Your idea of how important it is to when you have a strong image of children to believe that they can solve it, but that also support. That's what we're there for. We're their collaborators, and we do have more life experience, and we can sometimes give them that next little missing piece that can help them then run. Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
I mean, often explicit teaching is great in those contexts when you have this big vision of like, oh, we're going to make a spaceship. What does it take to make a spaceship? Oh, what are some misconceptions coming up? Oh, maybe I can just briefly mention during play or even during circle time, like just thinking like the difference between a square and a triangle that I've been playing with.
absolutely,
Not explicit, but again, just to emphasize that a strong image of children doesn't mean we don't teach things, right? But we're just,
absolutely.
to your point, we're very intentional about when and how we intervene.
And Rafa, I would love for us to, in our next podcast or some subsequent podcast, for us to revisit that idea,
Mm,
because I know in your Slack that you write, which is wonderful,
Substack.
Substack.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
No, no,
Slack.
no. Let me make sure people were clear. I'm not on Slack.
Like Slack. But just in that alone, like you brought up, this is just another resource that Rafa and I are always trying to create more resources. But but I just think that that tension of teachers in this approach, knowing that there are some times where we're teaching.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're not ever teaching something. We're teaching some skills so that then those languages, those 100 languages, can come to life. That is part of our role. And that I really love the scaffolding conversation is like, how do we do that dance and how do we get better at knowing, you know, when we're choreographing what our next step should be with intentionality.
I'm just so energized now, Pap. Is now I'm like, oh, we can talk about this also on the next podcast. Like this idea of the difference between an educator and a teacher. Like I've been playing around with this idea of an educator being a researcher, right? Collaborator, curator, designer, and a teacher,
Yeah.
indicating the direct teaching part, right? So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
we can get into
Lots
that.
to keep unpacking and thinking about. And we invite you to do that with us. And we do have a free offering once a month, or sometimes in the summer, it's actually 6 weeks between our cohort sessions. But we do have a cohort that we've developed where we're creating community for atelieristas or teachers who are also working maybe without an atelierista to support the 100 languages. But we have very rich conversations. I think we've now had 6 of them. Rafa, I think this will be our 7th coming up in
Mhm.
August.
Oh, time's
So,
flying by.
yeah, it's flying by. So, Rafa, I guess there's a way for you to invite people at the end. You can
Yes.
post something to
And
invite them
in
to
the
join
notes, in
us.
the notes, we'll have a link to a Google Doc that I have to remember to check more often. But that's
Oh,
where you can send us
okay.
your information or inquiries, and we can loop you in.
Please, we would love that. And let us know how you found this podcast. We would really like to know that as well.
Yeah.
So, I guess for now we should say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of the summer. We probably won't come back together to do another podcast for another month or so,
Hmm.
but we look forward to continuing the conversations.
Awesome. We'll see you later.
Thanks,
Until next
Rafa.
time. Thank you, Pat.